Pointing.
Yes, tickle finger of something is pointing. Okay, so on behalf of the LaRouche Political Action Committee, we're here again this week. My name is Dennis Speed. I'd like to welcome everybody here. We are going to have today a discussion which is largely an extension of what Mr. LaRouche began on Thursday. We're going into a week in which we're doing certain events here in the Manhattan Project, and these are all focused on a strategic reality that the people on the phone who are LaRouche's supporters around the country were confronted with by Mr. LaRouche on Thursday. And Lynn, I'd like to ask you if you'd like to say anything to get us started, and then we'll go right into questions.
I think we just had the statement of a congratulation to a worthy gentleman whose honor we have just honored again, and I think that's the way to go.
If you like that, that's fine. Then let's go.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. LaRouche. This is Jessica from Brooklyn. How are you?
A little damaged, but not too bad.
Oh, you say that, but you look great. Okay. The first thing I wanted to say is just a little aside that, I'm thinking of. When we did the Easter concert this past Sunday, my grandson attended with my daughter. He's a year old. And every time the orchestra would play something that had a lot of strings in it, or like the Amen at the end, he would rock back and forth and go, ba, 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 which is his favorite thing. We call him his babas. So I just wanted to say the concert was fantastic, and since Mason loved it, it had to have been fantastic. So we had a great time singing, and I've heard the video. The video is out on it, and it sounds marvelous. We sound great. So that's just a wonderful thing. What I wanted to ask about today, while we were actually singing our concert and praising God and bringing people from the community into the church to celebrate peace and prosperity and send out the word about the Silk Road and the things we're working on, it seems that there was an article that appeared in the London Globe, and I've also heard that it was in the Washington Post, that actually threatened the life of the Chinese leader Xi Jinping and his family. And people are asking, why didn't Putin attend this so-called nuclear peaceful whatever summit that Obama put together? And I'd like you to address that situation about Putin's strategic non-attendance, and the fact that they are saying that there's a defector that wrote this article or made sure this article got placed in these newspapers. And this defector from China must have been very angry because he threatened the life of the leader of China and his family and wanted him to step down. And my take on it is that it's Obama. And since Obama is a stooge for the British Empire, it's the British Empire that put this out, and there is no defector. And these are the kinds of things that they do in order to get their nonsense out into the public, into the world. And the strategic situation with Putin is very important as to why he did not attend this summit. And if you could comment on that.
Yes, I can. I just stated this past weekend what my policy was, which I understand, that we did not want to get Putin to come in on that action, that because we duck it in a sense, because we know what it is. It's a fraud. We don't want him to respond because what they would like to do is, since Putin has a leading position in Europe in general, and the record he has of what he's done, there's no need for us to suggest his role in this thing. He will act in good time. He's not a man who panics. He does what he has to do when he has to do it. And people cannot buck him into falling into some trap. So what happens is that the attack on China, the leadership of China, is a very serious threat. It's a threat by Obama. Now, any American citizen who hears this should realize this guy is an enemy. If he's trying to do that, if he's trying to make an enemy of China, then he should be thrown out of office. Period. Because nations have to cooperate. Whether they like each other or not is not the question. Do they maintain the kind of relationship which is necessary for nations to work together and not to start wars just for the sake of having wars? Obama is an evil man. He is a satanic figure among a number of satanic figures which we know in the world. He should have been thrown out of the presidency. There's no good reason he hasn't been thrown out of the presidency. And the Bushes are also in there. But the Obama is a satanic creature and should be treated as such. It's the only way to do it, because the people of the United States should reject Obama, throw him out, because he's a satanic figure, and that's not an exaggeration.
Okay.
And what he's done is done more to destroy the welfare of the people of the United States than any other single case on record. Just think of the number of Americans that have been destroyed by Obama. Just think of the number of people who are dying by the cause of Obama's behavior. He's the enemy of the United States. And anyone who doesn't recognize that is not a loyal citizen of the United States.
Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. LaRouche, this is Rick from Bergen County, New Jersey. I noticed in the EIR Daily Alert on Friday there were a number of interesting news items. Going back to the seemingly positive statement of Kerry about the necessity of collaboration among nations that came out recently, that was cited by Keisha in her article, I would juxtapose that to very negative things that are coming out of the Obama administration about the use of limited nuclear warheads and the building up of troops on the border of Russia and so forth. So there seems to be a difference. There seems to be something percolating from underneath. On the one hand, Kerry makes this statement that looks to be rather positive about the necessity of collaboration among nations. On the other hand, Obama is promulgating limited nuclear warheads and promoting the use of troops on the border of Russia. My question to you is, do you think that Kerry's faction or Kerry's attitude has any basis in reality, or is it merely fluff?
No, he is doing what he wants to do. Kerry is. What he wants to do. You know, he's a Boston man. He comes from Boston. You may know the location. Kerry was. His family there. And he's a very serious politician. Therefore, he's playing the game of a politician, but with a principle. Now, how far that principle goes, I don't know. I have a very strong indication. I know that Kerry has been doing major things against Obama, and that's an interesting issue, because everything that Kerry has been doing recently goes against the issues of Obama. Now, there are other people in the same situation in the U.S., but there should be no real mystery about this thing. And what you find out is that Obama is somewhat stymied by Kerry. He acts to stymie Obama. And there's no real mystery about this. There is a difficulty of some people to understand how that mechanism works. I don't really understand in full, but I do know that what Kerry is doing is directly opposite to what is being done otherwise by the president. So yes, it's a complicated thing, but the politics in this time is complicated. I know it in certain my access to knowledge of some leading leaders in the military service of the United States. So there are lots of complications, and I don't know all the answers to all these complications. But I do recognize the existence of a clear distinction on action. And but the point is that Obama is a satanic figure, an agent bred from the British oligarchy, and a satanic figure in the purest sense. Look, think of what Obama is. Obama has his record of killing people, ordering people killed on Tuesdays in the United States. And most of these people were innocent of any reason for being treated in that fashion. He's a murderer. And the problem is, how is anybody in the official ranks of the United States government endorse him, Obama? It's the same thing like what happened in 9/11. 9/11 happened, and the people, especially in the Manhattan area, got a good dose of this thing. But nobody yet today from the official ranks of the government of the United States has ever actually denounced the murders on behalf of the Saudis and the British monarchy. Nobody has ever done anything about that. That is in official positions. So therefore, the issue here is you've got Obama there. I know him technically. He's satanic. He's a satanic figure, purely satanic figure. He's not fit to be a president or even indicated to be recommended as a president in any case. And unless we, the people of the United States, throw Obama out of office now, there may not be any more United States or most of the world as a whole. If you condone Obama, you deserve the death you're going to reserve.
Okay, thank you.
Next question.
Hello, Lynn. Alvin here in New York. What Jessica began today's meeting with, I was very struck by when you first raised it on the phone on Thursday, because that type of analysis, where interpreting and understanding what Putin was actually doing through his absence, avoiding war, what you say would otherwise trigger then in the insane mind of Obama an immediate response to go after both China and Russia. So this example of strategy really took me, because the thing had just happened, and here you were presenting something that I had never considered and have been reflecting on that since. And just a couple of seconds ago, in working with people around organizing for our conference, one of the things that comes up as a block for them is the complaint that all these nations have so many problems and they're so terrible. And you just stated nations are going to have to learn to live and work together whether they like each other or not. And that's a theme that I think was very present in the BRICS and the principle of the BRICS forming together. Now, China is being attacked on 3 fronts, and they're all being highlighted in the work that we're doing: politically, economically, and now militarily. You mentioned one thing on the phone that did throw me, and I rewrote it. He said we have to think in terms of a strategic ways to manage thermonuclear war. And I said, well, so why do I know? What do you mean? I don't understand that. That really, how do you do that?
There's a lot of warfare built up in the nations of the planet. And the question is, can you get them to control themselves and not to turn these potential wars or warfare-like postures into an actual war? That's the point. So the point is the point of how do you get a peace out of a rage fit among nations? And that's extremely important. Therefore, you have to get the lesson across to respecting to policy. Nations must understand the interests of humanity first. If they can't respond to the purposes of humanity as such, you've got hell. And therefore, you can go all the way up to the firing lines. But if you don't go further, you will save civilization. And therefore, we do have to avoid conflict. We do have to avoid killing. But we do have to find a resolution, no matter how hostile the issue is. Now, the British Empire, for example, me and the British Empire. Now, I know all about the British Empire, and the British Empire is satanic. Now, just the fact that the Queen of England is a satanic figure is not a reason to go killing her. It's a reason to control her, to check her, and to prevent her from causing the kinds of things that will kill people and destroy their rights. So if the Queen of England will behave herself and not do any bad things, which is very difficult for her to avoid, then fine, she has a right to live, unless she commits a worse crime. In that case, she could be put in prison. No reason not to. Most of the royal family of Britain should be in prison. They should not be on the streets. They should be in prison. Maybe up in that nest they have up there in the middle of nowhere there. But no, the killing people is not the way to solve the problems, or trying to kill the people. Point is to try to create a process of constraint, which constrains people out of will or out of other kinds of compulsion, to prevent them from doing the commission of crimes.
Well, Lynn, our population, as you know, and you've stated, is the most striking thing. It wasn't the overdose, but you stated how the population as a whole, the real danger was their accepting death, accepting their own ends. And of course, we had a concert last Sunday. That movement is growing. I see it from many people that I know that have yet to take the challenge of the core principle, but the only way that they can save themselves and stop that type of pessimism that kills is to engage in that process So I'm happy about that, and I think the only way that I can deal with what you're laying out, the reality and truth, is if I go deeper into that and recruit more along those lines.
It's leadership. Look, what you need, you've got people in the United States, generations who have become senior while they're still in their career, and they commit suicide. Masses of people in the United States have been committing suicide. These were people who had been employed as workers, productive workers, and so forth. They had been reduced in their status, in their access, and so forth. But they're killing themselves. They're killing themselves out of despair. And that's the kind of thing you've got to look at. The rate of this kind of destruction of our people. These people were productive people. They may not have been the greatest geniuses in the world, but they're productive people. And we need productive people. We need their voice and their role. Our job is to think in terms of what this whole system is. And the system is way beyond Earth. I'm concerned, as so many other people are concerned, not about just the Earth. We're not impressed by Earth as such. We're concerned with managing the moon. We're concerned with managing the parts of the galactic system. We understand the relationship between the importance of the galactic system and mankind in general. We are devoted for the coming 2 years to try to complete a program which will expose the kind of conditions on the moon, which will help us to understand how the solar system works. So we are concerned with the future of mankind, not with the future of a person, but the future of mankind. And we must do nothing which destroys the ability of mankind to realize the intention which is inherent in the nature of mankind. We'll do everything necessary that we're able to do to defend the human species, not because of Earth, but because of the solar system.
Amen. Thanks, Lynn.
Okay. Next question.
Good afternoon, Lynn. How are you today?
Not too bad. A slight cold, but otherwise no complaints.
Good, good. All right. Given that Obama wants thermonuclear war and will go through any means to start one, even if it means using China and Russia's cohesion against its true purpose, well, Russia didn't take the bait. Now the focus will be North Korea and Ukraine. Neither country can stand on its own to launch a war without U.S. intervention. North Korea is on the verge of another famine and has alerted their populace to prepare to eat grass and roots. Yes. Ukraine's economy is completely fallen apart. The IMF has broken its own rules of never lending money to a country that can't pay its debts. Well, they owe Russia $3 billion plus hundreds of thousands of dollars daily interest. My question is how far is the U.S. going to go to intervene in both North Korea and Ukraine to start thermonuclear war? Because obviously it's not going to be those two countries to do it. It's going to be the U.S.
Well, the point is very simple. Dump Obama. There's no reason for him to be there. He's only a delusion and a disease. Obama is something who should never been existed as a president. The crimes he has committed on Tuesdays, the number of innocent people he has killed on his order. There's no reason for his being anywhere in the political system of the United States. And if it were not for the corrupt elements the really corrupt elements of the United States, we would not have that kind of problem. There's something wrong with the government of the United States if it allows Obama to continue to exist.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, Lynn.
Maria
from Boston. And I came down here to help build the conference. And this last week, we deployed to 3 campuses in the New York City area, and we got really an electric response, especially at a campus in Queens. But from the 3 campus deployments, we got about 100 people who signed up with us, a good number expressing interest to come to the conference, and quite a few of them contributing to become members and buy the literature. At the deployment in Queens, it was really interesting because when we would stop and engage some of the students, there were other students that would crowd around to listen, and we didn't have enough people to actually organize all the people who had stopped. And I think it was this combination of, it's a unity of the passion in the organizer, especially following this Handel's Messiah performance that we did on Easter, combined with, I mean, that really is it's a subjective challenge, which it is the question of immortality, and also we were engaging the students with a lot of questions, and we really need to draw them out because their minds have been so numbed by the culture. And the responses were interesting because we usually get a lot of fixation on the elections, but these young people really wanted to know what the solutions were. And we were emotionally connecting to these young people, addressing the suicidal culture that they're living in, and then walking them through the pamphlet and the solutions, the economic corridors, the New Silk Road, the World Land Bridge, and reviving our space program. And these young people were, the emotional response was tantamount to what was appropriate. And some of the questions we were asking them was, you know, what is the difference between human beings and animals? And with very few exceptions, almost everybody said we can think. So that was refreshing to hear that. And one student from one of the BRICS nations was adamant against the so-called corruption of the leader of his nation, but through this process of questions and the dialogue process, he signed up and did a membership anyway. So anyway, I just wanted to know what your thoughts were on this kind of response we're getting from the young people, but also I think what's required in us to be able to organize people, this unity of the music, the subjective question, and the Socratic reasoning.
Well, the question often comes up is, what is the motive for these kinds of motivation? Why should somebody wish to be attached to a mission for mankind in this, you know, conditions of life that they are operating in? Why? Now, the question is, how can you induce people to accept that position against all others? That's the point. And the problem is the culture of the United States, the given culture, the taught culture, is evil. It's decadent, and decadence leads to evil. I mean, if you really wish to do something good, and you believe in doing something good for mankind, then you're not going to do evil. And what happens in society, it's dominated by evil. And there's no better example of that than Obama. He is intrinsically a satanic figure. And the Bush family, in general, was similar. Obama was more efficient. He's a bigger killer. And he killed a lot of people. And so therefore your attitude is, if you are really reasonable, you will not tolerate, if you can, will not tolerate Obama or anything like him. Because that to support Obama would be an act of satanic behavior. Obama is a satanic figure. If you serve him, unless you're trying to silk him out, there's no excuse. There's no excuse. But so many people, especially in government, are selected because they are easily tempted into satanic practices. And it's just being mean to somebody sometimes. It's that simple. But education used to be a weapon in its best time. A good system, a weapon for developing the moral character of the humanity. Better teaching, which actually helps people to understand how the human mind should work. These kinds of things are important. And the point is we have to fight for those values. And if you want to solve these problems, the simple thing is, what are we going to do? We're going to concentrate on these values which have to be supplied and delivered to human beings, and try to get people to be induced to accept the idea of that moral purpose.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah. Next question.
Highland, Pim from Montreal again. Last Sunday we had this beautiful, inspiring performance of Handel's Messiah with about 450 people in the audience. And everybody there was completely inspired and uplifted, which became very clear in the discussions we had afterwards at the reception. And personally, and I'm sure this is shared with some of the people in this room, is that in the days after the conference or the concert, I was just much more creative and much more effective in everything that I did. And I know in your book, The Science of a Christian Economy, you talk about how it takes creativity to make an original and valid scientific discovery, but also to transmit that to others, you need a certain level of creativity. And essentially what we're doing or discussing here today is to do the impossible. But if you really think about it, it's actually very simple. It's just that people think that it's impossible, so they act on that belief. And I think that if we were consistently operating on the same level of creativity that we did, that was expressed in this concert, we would easily win. So my question is, where does this level of creativity really come from, and how can we as a group have more of that?
There are many answers to that question. The Italian answer is probably one of the best answers of all. I spent a good deal, a quarter of my time in Europe in particular, with Italian figures. Some of them were musicians and people like that. So I had a lot of Italian friends, and most of the Italian friends would fit in the same category as the people who performed at the recent event there. The people are drawn to that because intrinsically in the religious service, there's an implicit direction, and never underrate implicit direction. Implicit direction, which most people, when they sing religious songs, most of them don't know what they're doing. They have an understanding about it. They have a reason why they are impressed by this. They enjoy this. They have a certain sense of comfort. And I think the greatest thing in religious behavior that you would get from those locations are just exactly that. They don't know what they're adopting to. They don't know fully what the purpose of their action is. But they get a resonation of something there which is bigger than they are. And they sing for the sake of singing for something which is bigger than they are. And what happened in that particular case and the one earlier this year, there, same thing. Why do people go into these religious formalities in these things? Because they are seeking to find home. They're seeking to find the experience of life, which they can call it as their immortal home. That's what they want. That's what and when you can give them that, or suggest how they could do that, they're happy. The usual stuff about religion, most people who are religious don't know anything about what religion is. They get a grab at it. They get a feeling about it. But what it's really about is the devotion of a human being's life. The meaning of the life of any human being is, what does the life of that human being contribute to the benefit of mankind permanently? Mankind, all human beings die. Children die. The greatest children have outlived their parents. And what they became gave us the richness of what that child had accomplished. So there's a process in mankind where the action of mankind under certain conditions actually promotes and insists upon an improvement in what mankind will be in life, in the course of their life, the meaning of their life. Can you say, well, I'm going to be successful, I'm going to get money, I'm going to get this, is that going to make a difference for you? If you're going to die, will that make a difference for you? Or if you can live a life which can mean something, and when you can discover things in yourself which are creative and great, you may not understand why you're doing that, but you experience that. And therefore you say, I'm not going to go against it. This is something I don't fully understand it. I believe in it, but I don't fully understand it. And I would hope that my children will understand that better. And that's what this thing was about.
And that's the short answer. Thank you.
There you go. Fine.
Hello.
You do.
Hello. So just to actually follow up on what you had just talked about the contributing of something of permanent value to the rest of humanity, and about how when people are sometimes unable to do that, they think about it in terms of their children. I wanted to recount to you and ask you about an experience I had this morning. I went to a center here in New York in Queens, which is working on providing science and technology education to children of a underprivileged type of background. And the experience was pretty phenomenal. The children were very excited to be learning. They were so happy to know which planets had volcanoes and which ones didn't. They were doing experiments with air currents and dynamics using an actual wind tunnel instead of just a computer. The parents were so happy that their children had an opportunity to get a real education, and the teachers were very happy that they could go with engaging lesson ideas as opposed to being forced a curriculum and being given only 40 minutes to try to get it across to 50 students at a time. What it really made me think about was that from this direction, it seems very inspiring, that it revealed that there's clearly a potential among young people of whatever their background to be really engaged in profound and important concepts. It also showed that people were very excited about participating in that program. From the other direction, though, I was thinking about what you just brought up, the ability to contribute something of permanent value. If that whole program is premised on, let's say, advancing oneself, of going to college or of getting a better job, etc., it falls short of what we can do as an entire society to love children in a different kind of way by giving a mission of having a program, a direction like the way the Apollo program engaged people's minds, or the way the Chinese program right now is inspiring young people there. I was hoping you could talk about what the role is of the nation or of the state or of society in providing meaning to its people.
Question is, how does a family or a group of families leap above anything that they themselves have done? That you get certain children, certain developed people who will come to a grip on things that mankind have never understood. Einstein is an example of this. He's a typical example. Because here's a man in that generation, his genius is true, but it's not just a true genius, it is a true genius. His. Therefore, Einstein, well, you look at the whole period of the 20th century, the 20th century was a disaster for science because most of the scientists were incompetent and corrupt. And Einstein was the one man who gave the leading representation. Now, what we're looking for, again, is, okay, people are going to die. At one age or another age, they're going to die. What's going to happen to those people? Are they going to be better than the predecessors? Or are they going to be failures like their predecessors? And most scientists today are not worth much in eternity because they don't recognize science, not real science, the way Einstein did. And Einstein is only an example. The history of mankind is full of geniuses. It's not numerous in terms of relative to total population, but in every successful society, there's a hidden genius somewhere lurking around there, bringing people into achievements which otherwise would not have existed. The creative mind, the creative devotion is vital. And the education system in schools today is destructive. Even the best universities, so-called, are destructive. They spend more effort on destruction than they do on creation. And therefore, that's the idea of organizing young people and children to say, look, your parents are all right, but they're not geniuses. And then people would go up, my daddy is not a genius. But that's a good, sweet thing, not a bad thing.
Thanks.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Katia Lavin. I come from Bilbao in Spain. I study here just from exchange student here, and I'm studying international studies, specializing in relations between the United States and China. Hence, the new Silk Road issue is really of a great concern to me. My question was, what would be the role of the European Union and international institutions in addition to cooperation through the rule of law, international law, in the case of the new Silk Road? Thanks.
Well, you know the case in Spain and elsewhere from history sources, and you know that you have to achieve a insight into mankind which makes you feel that you are creating something new which is necessary for mankind. If you believe that your dedication, your work, is enabling you to capture the meaning of something that should be done and you have the idea, and you can experience that idea and express that idea, that's the best shot you've got. The best chance you have is to do something which is going to be very good. And how do you do that? You do it by working out something that you know is, or can discover, is something which you should be developing.
So what you're suggesting is that the European Union should directly join the entire New Silk Road initiative, right?
And yeah, the problem is there's so many people in Spain and Portugal and so forth, and Spain and France. Don't forget France. You want to find some bums, you'll get them in France. There's abundantly supplied. But then, anyways, the point is that you've got to keep the people of these nations, the people, get them to cling to the importance of these kinds of achievements, which are self-created. In other words, if you can reason beyond what you were taught, and find that you were able to understand something you had not yet been taught, and you knew it was true. That's what your goal is. Okay. Because the question is, how are you going to realize the meaning of your life?
In the right image. Yeah, that's what I thought. I wasn't sure if he was still talking.
What?
Yeah, Lynn, are you able to hear us?
No.
No.
Okay.
Just now.
That's a Cousin answer.
Well, is the answer delivered?
All right. I think we're back. Now we can see you.
I think I understand the nature of the problem.
Yes, right. Okay. We got everything you said except sort of the end was a bit disjoint.
Didn't get the end. So you're saying that the European, oh my God. Okay, that the European Union should join the New Silk Road, especially because it's a movement that comes from the people, and that it's the people who should be taught about it. So, like, the thing is, how can the people be taught if, like, no government or no institution is supporting it? How can, like, that campaign for the New Silk Road be
We have
the European Union?
The Silk Road is self-speaking in a very large degree. What has happened in the development of the recent improvements of the organization of China, the Chinese movement has produced within itself, not, you don't get all the people in it that you want, but you'll find within those people, you'll find that there's something that they have which is very important, and which is a contribution to the rest of mankind. Now, China today, under the present leadership of China, has such a characteristic. It creates more goodness than any other part of the world right now, because it has gone through a great development process recently. And remember that China is going to, within the next two centuries, or not next two periods rather, is going to actually open up a discovery of what a space program is, the moon problem. What's the meaning of the design of the moon? Now, there are intimations of that thing, but there's not completion. It's not results there. If you go into the oceans, and beyond that, you get into areas where you don't know, as of now, you don't know what the solution is. But you can find what the solution is, and what the space program was, when it was allowed before Obama shut it down, was we in the United States and in Germany and elsewhere were actually basing our work on this kind of development. Today, that kind of development is discouraged. But there's no reason why human beings in society should not be able to find in society a root of expression which says this is the good life. This is the thing that makes my life meaningful.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, next.
Hi, Lynn. Once again, you've said something which has provoked me to publicly address this question. It had to do with your characterization of John Kerry as a Bostonian. And so I feel compelled to raise a question I've thought about for a long time. In fact, this was what I've had on my mind watching him in this situation, which has to do with an aspect of the history of the United States and specifically of the role of John Quincy Adams, which is, I think, generally just completely underestimated, but it represents the continuing legacy of Leibniz's influence both in the formation of America but also over Russia, and how Quincy Adams prepared himself to become president of the United States by taking on the mission to be the first ambassador to Russia, and during that period of time was in continuous dialogue with the founders of the Russian Navy, who were involved in exploration of places like the North Pacific and of course also the lower areas of the Pacific. But and can you hear?
Yeah, it was just
Okay.
There's a block on the system, but it was fine.
Okay, and who in that period, it becomes evident if you look at it with enough scrutiny that that there was an agreement between him and that faction in Russia that the formation of a continental United States was in the interests of both Russia and the United States. Because that was not a foregone conclusion. I mean, I think part of the problem in organizing the American mind is that people take for granted the fact that we're this big blob, we're this big country, and sort of take that as a given and don't realize that this was a process that had to be conceived and was not a foregone conclusion. And there were different viewpoints on what it was all going to mean. And Quincy Adams is, in a real sense, the person who made the greatest personal contribution to guaranteeing that, although it took a long time before it wasn't completely under his administration. It took about 60 years to cement that. But one of the critical phases was that after his being there, despite all kinds of havoc that reigned after the Napoleonic Wars, that before he became president, one of his achievements was signing the first ever treaty any other nation ever signed with us, setting the 48th parallel on the Pacific coast as the border of the United States when the British wanted to take the whole Columbia River.
Yeah. And
the Russians allowed us to prevent that. So I'm just bringing that up because when I'm watching Kerry right now, I can't help but think of this lingering legacy of the way that Quincy Adams created the State Department and the kind of role that he also played with a completely inadequate president. It's unlike James Madison and Monroe understood much of anything that he was doing when he was over there. And he did it anyway and had many disagreements with Monroe. So I just wanted to bring this up because I think that the insular view of our nation that has developed under this kind of neo-isolationism or hostility towards the rest of the world, which has become sort of the propaganda mill. I mean, I don't think most Americans are really like that, but it's a kind of it's a kind of mindset imposed by the satanic environment, just means that a lot of the simple facts and realities of why this country even exists are not conscious to people, and that this is a case, in which something that people should know, that the Russian, the Russian military wanted the United States to be a continental republic against the influence of the British, right, and of the also of the French imperial and Spanish imperial interests that was still rampant at that time. I don't know if you want to comment on that.
But it's a complicated process. How? Oh.
Okay.
Hello? Okay, you're clear now? It was a copy echo. Yeah, well, it's true, but that's a part of a whole story. It goes in that particular period. And look what followed him. You have to look what followed him, and you see how the satanic forces came to work. And it was only after John Quincy Adams and his work and his relationship to Lincoln that we got a United States back again. So this is what happens. You have to devote yourself as a person to the realization of those kinds of what seem to be exceptional cases, which are the cases which lead to success for the human population, including the United States as such.
Exactly. Thank you.
Okay.
You go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Mr. LaRouche. This is Rick from Bergen County, New Jersey again.
Yeah.
It's not exactly a follow-up question, but on a slightly separate topic. You have made reference to that what we need is a legal coup to overthrow an illegal government. And in looking into the history of how the country came about to its current position, where it seems like the government is just dominated by an oligarchy, etc. I look at the history of two organizations, the CIA and the FBI, in particular the CIA under Allen Dulles and the FBI under Hoover. And in reading about it, I come to the conclusion that the assassination of JFK was essentially a coup d'etat facilitated by both of these organizations. That since the assassination of JFK, I've seen in my own life the deterioration of the United States and how it's gone downhill. Do you have anything to say about that?
Absolutely. This is exactly it. The history of the bad presidents of the United States is often the chief source. Now, in terms of the Dulles brothers are really purely satanic. There's nothing good about them. And the airport, Dulles Airport, be careful. I'm living close to that area in a certain manner of speaking, and I've actually flown in and out of Dulles Airport many times. I spent a good deal of my life running back and forth between the United States and various parts of Europe and Asia. So the Dulles Airport was one area that I fell into and fell out of often in my travels internationally. So I'm fully aware of these things. I also know the history of the Dulles brothers. I know what crimes they committed. And the tradition of the Dulles brothers persisted at Dulles Airport in a different way. So that's the kind of issue. So you really have to fight at all times to get a standard of behavior, as she just mentioned and previously the remarks. You have to recognize that there are certain special areas of development in the nation of the United States and as elsewhere. And these things are very important. They really we depend upon them. for their contribution. But then on the other hand, you got the Dulles brothers. And I could tell you the dirty stories about the Dulles brothers, but I'm not going to do that to you now. I don't want to spoil your meal.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Next question.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. LaRouche. Rod here from Brooklyn. With China's participation in the New Silk Road, aiming to end poverty in China by year 2020, and in the worldwide by 2025, we have real hope for the world. Obama's anti-China rhetoric at the nuclear meeting this week is a clue as to where he is at. Are we making progress in getting rid of Obama?
Well, we should get rid of Obama. Why didn't we do it? We've come to almost to the end of his second term in the presidency. And he's done more damage to the presidency of the United States than any one individual in recent times. Why do we let this guy bum in there? Why did we let a man who, on his Tuesday events, would actually celebrate the assassination of innocent members of our government, our nation, and kill him on Tuesdays, and similar kinds of crimes?
I think a lot of Americans fell for the con job that he perpetrated.
What is worse, it was terror. It was not a con job. It was a terror job. It was a systemic terror. And other people in government watched this terror and condoned it. Obama could not have existed as he did if the government of the United States, in the large part, did not defend and condone Obama for the crimes he committed. I mean, those of us who have been, well informed know exactly what Obama did. We know who he was. We know what he did. We know it accurately because we had, in my time, had access to the kind of information needed to know this. So the problem is that the people of the United States have been terrified by the Obama administration. The Bush family was an attempt at that kind of terror, but that didn't work too well. Obama did. Obama is the Satan of the United States.
Thank you.
Get rid of him.
Okay. Next.
Hi, Lynn. I want to ask a question. I think it was brought up nicely by the gentleman who's we're celebrating his birthday today. But you also bring up the subject, as in, the question of agape. I know that this process of fear, you confront people with the fact that they have a mission to fulfill in the meaning of the life of one's own life, but also the duty to fulfill that and causing others to fulfill it themselves. Sometimes I find it that they somehow, like you said about this factor of terror and fear. And so what I wanted to ask you is, how do you conquer fear within oneself and within others and just try to go after this question of agape?
Well, there are two major causes of problems of that nature. One is the bad education of children. particularly under the Bertrand Russell legacy. Remember, we had until the beginning of the 20th century, we in the United States in science and in other areas of science had an access to real science. Bertrand Russell came along, and Bertrand Russell was succeeded in inducing the scientists of the United States in that period, inducing them to become pigs. That is, to be useless and lying. And the one person that was a true scientist, Einstein, was unique. Just a matter. Here's a matter. A scientist who, in a wholesome science, that is, he had a broad comprehension of physical science. One man. And in the course of his death, the collapse of science, the understanding of science, collapsed. Now, there were the space program during that period. As long as the space program was operating, you had something good inside the economic system of the United States. Now, how much of that has survived? Almost nothing. We've got a little bit in certain parts of the territory. But the point is, the Einstein idea, the Einstein principle of scientific progress, has been largely suffocated. Some people are still working at scientific work, but there is a lot of difficulty. China has become a leader in science. Putin has remained a leader in science, where most of the other nations have failed to deal with science. So the problem is we have to look at ourselves and say, we've got to re-educate the people of the United States. It can be done. I got by with it for a while.
Lynn, I think that seems to be all of our questions for today. I want to just take up, if are all the questions, just the last thing you've said, because some of the themes we've hit today, I'd like to say a little bit about. Since I met you in 1970, I was in a Catholic seminary before that, and I was very interested in what you were saying about religion, because a lot of people here may or may not have had the experience that people like myself had, which was that when you're living with a group of people, all of them claim to be religious, and you quickly find out that there are very few people occupying the premises that have any notion of who God or what God is, nor are they actually very interested in it. I won't say a lot more about that, but this quickly comes home, particularly when you start asking certain questions like about the Inquisition and a few other things, and you suddenly find funny looks coming from the various priests who are teaching theology and who support it. But on what you said about the issue of intelligibility, what we know with respect to Bach's work, Mozart's work, Beethoven's work, that solved, in my view, this mysticism that religion imposes on people's thinking. That Beethoven's work and the work of the musicians, that's where the idea of creativity is far better located. When you get into this area of religion, at least I found, particularly at that time, everybody, you got the worst kind of satanic, the worst kind of weird theories were promulgated in the name of religion. And so the idea of human creativity that you're putting forward and that we're saying, especially when you look at something like the Obama issue, because you have made it clear and we've said here many times for many years actually, that Obama is not only evil, but he's actually a delusion that people have allowed themselves to be cowed by through fear and other things. A delusion, a criminal delusion, and that the country being saved by what you're trying to do in Manhattan, what you call the Hamilton Project in particular, this is something that we have not only a duty to, but we're actually in position to do it. It mostly is a matter of trying to figure out, based on the kind of initiatives that you're giving, the way that this form of creativity becomes immediately accessible to people by taking the issue straightforwardly. Remove Obama. Confront your fear. Confront the terror. Confront the enemy. If you do that, then all the other problems come into focus. So I'm mainly just responding to you and just thinking about the last thing you said, because yeah, you got away with it for a while, and then they basically tried to kill you, then they put you in jail. They're still trying to more or less keep you completely contained, and we're supposed to be breaking out here. So I just wanted to say that and see if you have anything to say on that or anything else.
I want to say about that. I think it's going to take too much more time.
We couldn't hear you, sir. We couldn't get out.
I could say a lot about this thing, and I could pour it out, but I think the time is short, and I think the discussion would require a little more exposition to make it clear.
Okay, fine. So any summary remarks, or is that it for today?
I think today was probably interesting. Including some positive things that, you know, members who are having celebrating birthdays on this occasion. It was fun, real fun.
Okay, fine. So I guess that's it. Any other questions? Anybody have anything? There's someone over here who'd like to ask something.
Well, this is my first time in this forum. My name is Boots. This is my from New York City, from Manhattan. Yeah, and it's my first time here, and I'm hearing a lot about government being Satan and all this, and I don't disagree. I can't remember a good president that we've had. Maybe Reagan, but that's just by dumb luck. I don't know. But in our society here in America, can you speak to a statement like the worst enemy to the state is an uneducated voter? That's my question.
Yeah, it's a lot. There's a lot behind all this. It's a big issue, and I don't think it's possible to give a fair description of what this problem is without going into it. You have to go into it. You have to take, you know, practical examples of what the differences are. And I think some people go through it and some people don't. And sometimes people have more difficulty in trying to understand how to deal with it. The idea of creating creating more of wealth, creating more of progress for mankind. These kinds of values are the things that really are typify the goals we want to reach. And that the rest of it is experience.
Okay, so let's leave it at that.
All right.
Okay, Lynn, thank you. We'll see you next week.
Okay, there you go.